Hey everyone, we got a request from Sandra for permissions. So Sandra, we're going to do permissions. One of my least favorite topics, by the way, but anyways, it's something that we all have to deal with in the world. So here goes. Basically in Business Central, permissions are set up in such a way that they have extremely high flexibility. You can set up any type of permissions pretty much that you want. Now with that flexibility comes also complexity. So even though it looks simple on the surface, it can be complicated when you actually dive into it. So the way it works is, of course, you have a user which you will give permissions to. That user can be put into a group, user group, so that you can set the permissions for the group, and then if the user is inside the group, it gets the group's permissions. So you could have user 1, user 2, etc. So then you have something called permission set. Set, and this permission set has a name. Let's say it's item. So you have access to items. So it's an example. So inside here is where the detail comes in. So let's actually call this modify item. So in here will be everything that you need access to in order to modify an item. And you can actually look at this in the system. So you would need access to the item table. And and here we have actually, execute, read, and write, and so forth, permissions. And that could be indirect, and this gets really technical. I'm not sure how technical I'm going to get in this video. But on the item table, let's say in order to modify the item, you need definitely read, write, and execute permissions. I think there's also delete. And then there is just a list of tables that you need to access. So when you're actually creating an item, you might need to be able to read let's say the item tracking information table, because you look up into that, or the base unit of measure, or units of measure table. Let's do that one. Units of measure table. You will definitely need a read access to that, because you look up into units of measure, you pick what you want, and you put it into the item table. And so there are all these extra tables that you will need access to in order to create an item. It's a lot. And for like a normal person who really just wants the system to allow you to create an item and not really keep track of all of this, you can use existing permission sets in Business Central that are already set up for most of these things. Now, if you don't have a permission set for what you need to do, and it's something completely new, you might need to go down to this level and figure out which tables will actually work. And there is a tool out there called Easy Security by a great guy, Per Gudmundsson, and I'm not pitching for you, Per, so you have to say thank you when next time I meet you. Go ahead and take a look at that if you have to do a lot of permissions. That tool does everything under the sun regarding permissions, and is really good in managing, creating new permission sets, moving them around between users, keeping track of the groups, and all of those things. So if you're frustrated with what you have in Business Central, take a look at Easy Security. But I'm gonna go into the application and show you at least this concept there, and hopefully that will kind of open up a little bit of clarity on the subject. So let's take a look at the system. When we're dealing with permissions, we just go in here and type in permissions, and we get here into permission sets. So this is the base of the permissions. Basically, each one of these sets can be assigned to a user. And each one of these sets has permissions right here. So for example, if I pick banking, you're going to see that the permissions that are given for banking are going to be all of these tables here. And so you can actually give permissions based on tables, but also on pages or code units. Those are kind of system entities, but most of the time, all of the permissions are given just based on tables, and then all pages and code units are allowed as long as you have access to the table, which is the base of that. So, like for example here, I can take a look at permissions, and you get this big technical thing here. All of the tables listed for that, for the banking, and whether they have a read, insert, modify, delete, execute, etc. for that. So if we go out of this, we can also take a look at the user groups. So the user groups that we have here are basically groups that will have permission sets. So if the user is inside a group, then they will have a set of many permission sets that are connected to that group. So it's easy. So you basically put the user in accountants group, and they will have access to those. So you can see here for the accountants, we have basic, jobs, edit, and here local, region. So these are the permission sets for that. And you can also, so here you can see the permission set per user group. And here you have across, you have all the user groups. And then down here you have the permission sets, and you have which one has what. So it's a kind of nice matrix. This gets really like involved because it's so many permission sets and the user groups. So if you're setting this up, maybe you want to trim down the user groups that you have to as few as possible, and then set that up for the permission sets. Also, what I think is really cool is, or here you can see user by user group, so who is in which user group, which is very nice. I think all of our users here are administrators or super users. You can see that here. So they don't really have to belong to any group. This makes it a little bit simpler. Finally, what I think is really cool, which is sort of new in Business Central, is you can see effective. Just go ahead and look here. Effective permissions. So here you can actually take a look at Paul, which I'm logged in as, and I can see what permission set I'm in, and I can see the effective permissions on every single table according to all the permission sets that I'm in. So I've been given a number of permission sets, and I can then see overall how does that affect all of the tables in the system. What can I do? I can here do anything with payment terms, anything with currency, anything with customer price, all of that. So that basically gives me the total permission. So if for some reason user cannot edit the customer and they were supposed to be able to, you can then come in here and see the effective permissions. Notice that, and then possibly fix that in one of the groups or permission sets. So I know this is it's a bit complicated, and in its simplest terms, you basically just go into permission sets. You can then go into the user. Actually, sorry, let's just go into user. Permission set per user. And you can see here, just check off who is supposed to be and what, and then you've set it up. And if you can work with these groups that are automatically set up in the system by default, then you should be fairly good. And I hope that shed some light on it.